Virgin got pregnant with twins after one night with infertile billionaire. Don't scroll past this. Your heart led you here for a reason. Beautiful souls. I'm Mr. Daniel, and this isn't just a channel, it's your family. Today's story might be exactly what your soul needed to hear. If you feel the calling, comment, "I'm ready, Mr. Daniel," and let's begin this journey together. Your one comment keeps our family's heartbeat alive. Don't just watch. Become part of something greater. She had survived his abandonment, forgiven his denial, and built a miracle family from the ashes of heartbreak. But nothing prepared her for the Tuesday morning, when a certified envelope proved that some secrets can destroy everything, even love that defied medical science. The legal documents trembled in her hands as she read the name of the woman claiming to carry her husband's child. Vivian Monroe, Boston, Massachusetts, 8 months pregnant with a boy. The words blurred as tears gathered in Aaliyah Blackstone's eyes. Paternity, child support, genetic probability match. Each phrase hit her like a punch to the stomach, dragging her back to a time she thought she'd buried forever. 3 years of marriage, 2 miracle children who proved the impossible. 4 years of therapy, growth, and choosing each other every single day. All of it suddenly felt like sand slipping through her fingers. But when she confronted Xavier that evening, his confession shattered more than trust. It revealed that for 16 years, he'd been hiding a brother everyone believed was dead. A brother who had just woken up from a vegetative state with one mission: destroy everything Xavier loved. What would you do if you discovered your husband had been lying to protect you from a family secret so dark it could destroy your children's future? Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they were hiding something massive for what they claimed were good reasons? Has someone ever broken your trust while believing they were saving you? The woman who once traveled 1,000 miles on a Greyhound bus to prove her impossible pregnancy now faced accusations that her husband had done to someone else exactly what he'd once done to her. The irony was cruel. The pain was familiar. But something felt wrong about all of it. Something that made her nursing instincts scream louder than her wounded heart. Was this really history repeating itself? Or something far more dangerous? Stay with me as we discover a conspiracy designed to weaponize their greatest wounds against them. If you watched part 1 and believed in Aaliyah and Xavier's miracle love story, comment, "I'm ready for part 2, Mr. Daniel." And let's discover together whether love built on second chances can survive the ultimate test. Your comment keeps our family's heartbeat alive. Because here's what I need you to understand. This isn't just a story about betrayal. This is a story about what happens when enemies study your scars and try to rip them open again. This is about 2 people who learn to fight together instead of against each other. This is about a family that refused to let their past destroy their future. The Blackstone family had survived the impossible before. A pregnancy that defied medical science. A love story that rebuilt itself from ashes. Miracle twins born during a hurricane. But the enemy coming for them now knew every weakness, every trigger, every wound that had almost torn them apart the first time. Marcus Blackstone had been watching from the shadows for 6 months. Planning, plotting, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment had arrived. Now, let me take you back to the Buckhead mansion, where everything was about to change. For 3 years, she believed they had no secrets left. A certified envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, and the perfect life she'd built began to crumble like a house made of beautiful lies. The Buckhead mansion gleamed in the Georgia morning sun, its manicured gardens and sparkling pool the picture of wealth and happiness. 5-year-old Xavier Jr. chased his twin sister Aaliyah Rose across the perfectly trimmed lawn while their laughter echoed through the spring air. Inside the designer kitchen that had witnessed countless family breakfasts and whispered, "I love yous." Aaliyah Blackstone stood at the center island, reviewing her schedule for the day. Emory Children's Hospital needed her for a 12-hour shift. The twins had soccer practice at 4. Xavier had promised to handle dinner. Life had finally become what she dreamed about during those dark months of single motherhood. Predictable, stable, full of small moments that felt like tiny miracles. But lately, something had shifted. Xavier's late nights at the office had become more frequent over the past 6 months. He'd blamed expansion projects, board meetings, the demands of relocating Blackstone Pharmaceuticals' headquarters permanently to Atlanta. She'd believed him because believing him was easier than questioning. Because 4 years of therapy had taught her that not every fear needed to become an accusation. Still, she found herself checking his phone when he showered, analyzing his calendar for gaps that didn't make sense, hating the suspicious woman she was becoming while being unable to stop her transformation. "Mama!" Aaliyah Rose burst through the back door, her dark curls bouncing. "Xavier pushed me." "Did not," her brother protested, following close behind with grass stains on his knees. Aaliyah smiled at her miracle children, these impossible babies who had defied medical science to exist. Looking at them always reminded her that sometimes the universe delivered gifts you never thought you'd receive. "Both of you wash up," she said, kissing each forehead. "Miss Rosa is picking you up for school in 20 minutes. The doorbell rang as the twins raced upstairs, arguing about who would use the bathroom first. Aaliyah wiped her hands on a dish towel and walked to the front door, expecting a package or perhaps a neighbor. Instead, a postal worker held out a certified envelope requiring her signature. "Mrs. Blackstone?" She signed automatically, her mind already calculating whether she had time to open mail before leaving for work. The return address meant nothing to her. Richardson and Associates, Boston, Massachusetts. She carried the envelope to the kitchen, sliding her finger under the seal as she walked. The first page made her stop moving. The second page made her stop breathing. Petition for paternity and child support. Filed by Vivian Monroe against Xavier Matthew Blackstone, claiming a child conceived 14 months ago during a pharmaceutical conference in Miami. The attached medical report stated that the petitioner was currently 8 months pregnant with a boy. Preliminary genetic markers suggested a 94% probability match with samples obtained from Blackstone Pharmaceuticals' employee wellness program. Aaliyah read the documents 3 times. Her hands shook so badly the pages rustled like leaves in a storm. The words transported her back to that Jacksonville clinic, to 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test, to months of being called a liar by a man who swore he could never have children. Have you ever had a moment when your past trauma came rushing back, triggered by something that felt too familiar? When history seemed to be repeating itself in the cruelest possible way? Share your experience in the comments below. The kitchen that had felt like home now felt like a crime scene. Every surface held memories of the life she'd built with Xavier. The coffee maker he'd bought because she mentioned liking a particular brand. The handprints on the refrigerator from the twins' art projects. The calendar marking their upcoming 4th anniversary with a heart sticker Aaliyah Rose had placed there. All of it suddenly felt fragile, breakable, built on foundations that might be as false as the promises Xavier had made that first morning in Jacksonville when he'd walked away from her. She thought about calling him, demanding an explanation, giving him a chance to deny everything before she let fear consume her. But she'd been through this before. She knew what denial looked like from a man who couldn't face his own truth. So she waited. She sent the twins to school with hugs that lasted longer than usual. She called in sick to the hospital for the first time in 2 years. She sat at the kitchen table with the legal documents spread before her, reading every word until she'd memorized each devastating detail. And when Xavier's Tesla pulled into the driveway at 6:30 that evening, she was ready. As she read Vivian Monroe's name and the 94% genetic probability match, one thought consumed her. He promised he'd changed. He swore he'd never lie to me again. But when Xavier walked through the door that evening, the look on his face told her that everything she believed about their miracle love story was about to be tested in ways she never expected. She expected excuses, denials, maybe even tears of guilt. What she didn't expect was a confession that rewrote everything she thought she knew about the man she married. Xavier entered the kitchen with his briefcase in one hand and takeout bags in the other, his smile bright until he saw her face. The smile died. The takeout bags hit the counter with a heavy thud. "Aaliyah, what's wrong? Where are the kids?" "Your mother has them." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Sit down, Xavier." He sat across from her at the table, his eyes moving to the documents spread between them. The color drained from his face like water from a sink. His hands, the same hands that had held their newborn twins with such tenderness, began to tremble. "Where did you get these?" His voice was barely a whisper. "They were delivered this morning, certified mail." She pushed the petition toward him. "Vivian Monroe, 8 months pregnant, 94% genetic match." "Tell me this isn't real, Xavier. Tell me you didn't do to someone else exactly what you did to me." He read the documents in silence, his jaw tightening with each page. When he finished, he didn't look up. He just sat there, staring at Vivian Monroe's name like it held answers he didn't want to give. "Say something," Aaliyah demanded, her composure cracking. "Say anything." Xavier's face drained of color as he read the documents, his hands trembling in a way Aaliyah hadn't seen since the day DNA results proved their twins were his. But this trembling wasn't relief. It was the terror of a man watching his carefully constructed walls finally collapse. "I didn't sleep with this woman," he said finally. "I've never touched anyone since you, Aaliyah. You have to believe that." "Then explain this." She grabbed the genetic report, waving it between them. "Explain how a woman I've never heard of is claiming to carry your child with a 94% match to your DNA. Because the match isn't to me." Xavier looked up, his dark eyes filled with something she'd never seen before. Shame, fear, and a grief so deep it seemed bottomless. "It's to my brother." The words made no sense. Xavier's brother had died in the same car accident that killed their parents when Xavier was 15. She'd seen the photographs in the family albums, read the obituary that had been preserved in a scrapbook. Marcus Blackstone had been 18 years old when the crash took him. "Your brother is dead," Aaliyah said. "You told me your brother died." "I told you what I believed for years." Xavier's voice cracked. What everyone believed. What was supposed to be true. What would you do if you discovered your partner had been hiding a massive family secret, but claimed they did it to protect you? Is protection ever a valid excuse for deception? Tell me your thoughts below. "Vivian Monroe is my dead brother's widow," Xavier said, his voice hollow. "And if she's pregnant, that baby isn't mine. It's part of something much darker that I've been trying to protect you from for 3 years." The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of Atlanta traffic. Aaliyah felt like she'd stepped into a different reality, one where the rules she understood no longer applied. "Start from the beginning," she said, her nursing training taking over as she forced herself to gather information before reacting. "Tell me everything." Xavier took a shaky breath. Marcus didn't die in the accident. He survived with severe brain damage, a traumatic injury that left him in what doctors called a vegetative state. Our parents' lawyers made a decision to keep it quiet, to protect the family reputation and the company's stock price. For 16 years. For 16 years, I've been paying for his care at a private facility in Massachusetts. The best doctors, the best treatment, everything money could buy. I visited twice a year, sat beside his bed, talked to him even though he never responded. Xavier's voice broke. I thought I was doing the right thing, honoring my brother's dignity by keeping his condition private. But something changed. Xavier nodded. 6 months ago, Marcus woke up. The doctors called it a miracle recovery, 1 in a million chance. His brain had somehow healed itself over the years, forming new connections that shouldn't have been possible. That's when your late nights started, Aaliyah realized. That's what you've been hiding. He woke up remembering everything, Aaliyah. Our childhood, our parents, the accident. But he also woke up with 16 years of buried anger. He believes I abandoned him, that I inherited everything while he rotted away forgotten. Marcus didn't just wake up, Xavier continued, his voice breaking. He woke up remembering everything I took from him. Our parents' love, the company, the inheritance. Now he wants to take the only thing that matters more to me than any of it. His eyes met hers with desperate intensity. He wants to destroy us, Aaliyah. And he knows exactly how to do it. The man who once abandoned her had been fighting a secret war for 3 years, protecting their family from an enemy she never knew existed. Xavier led her to his home office, a room she rarely entered because it felt like his private space. But tonight, as he unlocked the door with a key she'd never seen him use, she understood that privacy had been hiding something far more significant than work stress. The home office that had witnessed countless late-night work calls now revealed its true purpose. Walls covered with investigation reports, photographs of Vivian Monroe meeting with lawyers, and a timeline that stretched back 6 months to the day Marcus Blackstone opened his eyes and began plotting his revenge. Aaliyah stood in the center of the room, turning slowly to take in the evidence of her husband's secret war. Manila folders were stacked on every surface. A whiteboard covered with names and connections dominated one wall. Photographs of a woman she now recognized as Vivian Monroe showed her at various locations. Outside a Boston courthouse, entering what looked like a law firm, even standing near Woodward Academy. "You've been investigating her for months," Aaliyah said, "while I thought you were pulling away from us." "I hired private investigators the day Marcus contacted me," Xavier explained, pulling files from a locked drawer. "The day after he woke up, he called my office, told me he knew about you, about the twins, about everything we'd built. He said he was going to take it all from me, piece by piece." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because he knew things, Aaliyah. Personal things about our relationship, about how we started, about the DNA test drama, about your trauma from being called a liar." Xavier's hands shook as he spread documents across his desk. He studied our love story like it was a business plan, found every weakness, every trigger, every wound that almost destroyed us the first time. When someone lies to protect you, is it still betrayal? Can good intentions excuse keeping secrets from the person you love? Drop a comment with your honest opinion. "You've known about this for 6 months?" Aaliyah's voice cut through the room like shattered glass. "You've been lying to me for 6 months while I wondered why you were pulling away." I was trying to stop it before it touched you. Xavier replied, desperation bleeding through his carefully maintained composure. I was trying to prove the pregnancy was fake before you ever had to know. And is it? Fake? Xavier pulled out a folder marked with red tape. My investigators found medical records that don't add up. Vivian Monroe visited 3 different fertility clinics in the past year. She had procedures that suggest she was trying to get pregnant, not that she already was. The timeline of her supposed pregnancy doesn't match her actual whereabouts during the Miami conference. So she's lying about the pregnancy? We think she's lying about everything, but proving it legally takes time. Time Marcus isn't giving us. Aaliyah picked up a photograph that made her blood run cold. The image showed Vivian Monroe standing outside Woodward Academy, watching Xavier Jr. and Aaliyah Rose walk to their car with their grandmother. They're not just trying to destroy our marriage, she said, her mother's instincts turning protective fury into ice. They're watching our children. Marcus knows that the twins are our greatest vulnerability. He knows that threatening them would break both of us in ways that money and marriage never could. Why? Aaliyah demanded. What does he actually want? The company? Your money? What's worth going through all this trouble? Xavier sank into his office chair, looking older than she'd ever seen him. He wants me to feel what he felt. 16 years of being forgotten, of having everything stripped away, while someone else lived the life that should have been his. He doesn't want my money, Aaliyah. He wants my pain. There's something else, Xavier said, pulling out a photograph that made Aaliyah's blood run cold. The image showed Vivian Monroe standing outside Woodward Academy, watching Xavier Jr. and Aaliyah Rose walk to their car. They're not just trying to destroy our marriage. They're watching our children. The room seemed to shrink around them. 4 years of healing, of learning to trust again, of building something beautiful, one from broken pieces. All of it now threatened by a brother Xavier had mourned for 16 years and a woman willing to fake a pregnancy to help destroy a family. But Aaliyah Johnson Blackstone wasn't the same scared nursing student who'd taken a Greyhound bus to Boston to prove her impossible pregnancy. She'd survived hurricane deliveries and heartbreak. She'd rebuilt her life and her trust. She'd learned that the only way through impossible situations was together. Tell me everything else, she said, her voice hard with determination. Every detail, every suspicion, every piece of evidence you have. No more protection, no more secrets. We face this together or we don't face it at all. 4 years of therapy, growth, and conscious choice had prepared them for many challenges. But nothing prepares you for the moment your greatest fears become weapons in someone else's hands. They talked until 3 in the morning, Xavier emptying 6 months of secrets, while Aaliyah listened with the clinical focus she'd developed in emergency rooms. Names, dates, connections. Every detail of the conspiracy Marcus had built with Vivian Monroe. By the time Xavier finished, Aaliyah understood the full scope of what they faced. A brother with legitimate grievances and unlimited rage. A woman willing to fake pregnancy and file false legal claims. A scheme designed to exploit every weakness in their relationship. Every trigger from their past. We need help, she said finally. Professional help, not just investigators. Someone who understands what this kind of attack does to people who've already survived trauma. Xavier nodded. Dr. Martinez. Their genetic counselor had become something more than a medical professional over the years. She'd walked beside them through fertility revelations and emotional healing, understanding their story in ways that most therapists never would. Dr. Martinez's face filled the laptop screen at 7 the next morning, her expression carrying the calm authority of someone who had walked them through 2 years of healing. "This is the test," she said. "Everything you've learned about conscious partnership, about choosing trust over fear, about fighting together instead of against each other. This moment is where you prove it was real. Have you ever had to choose between protecting yourself and fighting alongside someone who hurt you? When facing an external threat, how do you balance processing betrayal while presenting a united front? Share your thoughts below." "I'm furious with him," Aaliyah admitted to the screen, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "He kept this from me for 6 months. Let me think something was wrong with us when the problem was out there." "Your anger is valid," Dr. Martinez said. "Xavier, how do you respond to that?" "She's right." Xavier's voice carried the weight of a man who'd finally stopped running from hard truths. "I told myself I was protecting her, but I was really protecting myself. From her disappointment. From having to admit that my family is more broken than I ever told her." "And yet," Dr. Martinez continued, "you're both here, together, at 7 in the morning, facing this as partners rather than adversaries. What does that tell you?" Aaliyah looked at Xavier, really looked at him for the first time since the envelope arrived. She saw exhaustion, fear, guilt. But she also saw the man who'd learned to stay instead of run, who'd spent 4 years proving that people could change. "It tells me we've grown," she said. "But growth doesn't mean his choices didn't hurt." "Can you hold both truths?" Dr. Martinez asked. "That his choices hurt you and that you can face this threat together? That you can process the betrayal while still presenting a united front against people trying to destroy your family?" The question hung in the air. Aaliyah thought about the twins sleeping peacefully at Xavier's mother's house, about the photographs of them being watched at school, about what Marcus and Vivian would do if they succeeded in tearing their parents apart. "I'm furious with you," Aaliyah said, turning to face Xavier directly. "But I'm more furious at the people trying to use our wounds against us. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to tell me everything. No more protection, no more secrets. We're going to move the twins to a school with better security. We're going to hire lawyers and fight this fake paternity claim. And we're going to destroy anyone who threatens our children." Xavier reached for her hand, stopping short of actually touching her, asking permission, acknowledging that his choices had consequences even as they committed to facing the threat together. She took his hand. That night, as they lay in bed not touching but not apart, Aaliyah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message contained a single photograph. Their twins at recess, taken through the fence of their school playground. Below it, 3 words that stopped her heart. Beautiful family. Fragile. She showed Xavier the message, watched his face go white, felt him reach for her hand in the darkness, holding on like she was the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly become quicksand. "They want us scared," she whispered. "They want us to turn on each other. What do we do?" Aaliyah thought about everything she'd survived. Abandonment, denial, hurricane deliveries and single motherhood, and rebuilding from nothing. She thought about the woman she'd become, the mother she'd grown into, the partner she'd learned to be. We show them they picked the wrong family to threaten. She'd spent 4 years healing from the woman she became when Xavier first abandoned her. Now she would need every ounce of that strength to face the woman trying to become her. The decision to meet Vivian Monroe came from Aaliyah, not Xavier. He'd argued against it, worried that confrontation would escalate the situation. But Aaliyah had something her husband didn't. The lived experience of being the woman no one believed. "I know what it looks like when someone's lying about pregnancy," she told him over breakfast, her voice carrying the conviction of hard-earned wisdom. "I spent months being called a liar, being accused of fraud, being treated like a gold digger. If Vivian is faking, I'll know." What if she's not faking? What if Marcus found some way to actually create this pregnancy? Then I'll know that too. The meeting took place at a restaurant in Midtown Atlanta, neutral territory with enough public visibility to keep things civil. Aaliyah arrived early, choosing a table near the window where the afternoon light would reveal every detail of Vivian Monroe's carefully constructed persona. Vivian Monroe was everything Aaliyah had feared during those dark months of pregnancy. Polished, confident, wearing her designer maternity dress like armor and her fake sympathy like expensive perfume. But Aaliyah had carried real twins through Hurricane Helen. She knew what genuine pregnancy looked like. And something about Vivian's perfect presentation felt like a costume. When you've lived through something traumatic, does it make you better at recognizing when someone else is lying about experiencing it? Have you ever used your pain as a tool for truth? Tell me in the comments. Mrs. Blackstone. Vivian slid into the opposite seat with practiced grace, her hand moving to rest on her belly in a gesture that seemed rehearsed rather than natural. "I appreciate you meeting with me. I know this must be difficult." "You're right," Aaliyah replied evenly. "It is difficult. So let's skip the small talk and get to the point. You claim to be pregnant with my husband's child. I'm here to look you in the eye while you tell me that story." Vivian's smile flickered, just for a moment, before settling back into its mask of wounded innocence. "I didn't want to do this, but Xavier left me no choice. He took advantage of me and then pretended it never happened." "When did this supposed affair occur?" "The pharmaceutical conference in Miami, 14 months ago. We had drinks, talked about his company. One thing led to another." Vivian's voice carried the practiced cadence of a story told many times. "I didn't know he was married until afterward. By then, I was already pregnant." Aaliyah studied the woman across from her with the clinical eye she'd developed through years of nursing. The way Vivian held her body, the positioning of her hands, the subtle shifts in posture that real pregnant women made instinctively. "That's interesting," Aaliyah said, her expression carrying none of the warmth she reserved for people she trusted. "Because the Xavier I know spent 2 years in therapy, learning that running from responsibility nearly cost him everything. The man who proposed to me with our twins watching isn't capable of what you're describing. People hide who they really are. Some people do. My husband used to be one of them. But he spent 4 years proving he's changed." Aaliyah leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about your pregnancy symptoms. Morning sickness? Cravings? How's the baby moving?" The question seemed to catch Vivian off guard. "Normal symptoms. The usual things." "The usual things like what? First trimester exhaustion? Third trimester back pain? Does the baby kick more at night or during the day? Have you felt hiccups yet?" Vivian's answers came too slowly, too vaguely. A woman 8 months pregnant would have specific stories, particular moments, the intimate knowledge of carrying life inside her body. Instead, Vivian spoke in generalities that could have come from any pregnancy guide. And then Aaliyah saw it. As Vivian reached for her water glass, her designer blouse shifted just enough to reveal what Aaliyah's trained eyes had been searching for. The edge of a prosthetic pregnancy belly, its silicone seam visible for just a moment before Vivian adjusted her clothing. The pregnancy was fake. But if Vivian wasn't really pregnant, What exactly was Marcus's plan? The paternity claim would fall apart the moment anyone demanded proof. The genetic match meant nothing if there was no child to test. Unless the pregnancy was never the point. Unless the goal was simply to plant doubt, trigger old wounds, and watch Aaliyah and Xavier destroy each other the way they'd almost done 5 years ago. "I think we're done here," Aaliyah said, standing with the calm authority of a woman who just solved a puzzle her enemies hadn't expected her to understand. "But I have a message for whoever put you up to this. You studied our story looking for weaknesses. You found the people we used to be. What you didn't count on is who we've become." Vivian's mask finally cracked, revealing something ugly beneath the polished surface. "You don't know what you're dealing with. Neither do you." Aaliyah walked out of the restaurant with her head high and her phone already dialing Xavier's number. The pregnancy was fake, which meant the conspiracy was about something else entirely. Something bigger than a paternity claim. Something more dangerous than she'd realized. And whatever it was, she and Xavier were going to face it together. For 16 years, Marcus Blackstone had lived in the space between death and life, dreaming of the brother who inherited everything while he rotted away forgotten. Now he was awake, and his dreams had become nightmares for everyone Xavier loved. The private jet touched down in Massachusetts on a gray Thursday morning, clouds hanging low over the countryside like a warning. Xavier hadn't slept in 3 days. Not since Aaliyah returned from her meeting with Vivian Monroe, carrying proof that the pregnancy was fake and questions about what Marcus really wanted. Now he was about to find out. The private care facility in the Massachusetts countryside looked more like a luxury resort than a medical institution. Its manicured grounds and discreet staff funded by 16 years of Xavier's guilt money, but the man who waited in the private suite bore little resemblance to the brother Xavier remembered. Marcus Blackstone had emerged from his vegetative state with his intelligence intact and his humanity burned away. Xavier paused outside the door, his hand trembling on the handle. The last time he'd seen Marcus conscious, they'd been teenagers fighting over the car keys the night of the accident. The argument that had distracted their father. The moment that had changed everything. "Come in, little brother." Marcus's voice carried through the door, rough from years without use, but sharp with awareness. "I've been waiting 16 years for this conversation." The suite was comfortable, expensive, filled with books and technology that suggested Marcus had used his months of consciousness well. But the man sitting in the leather armchair looked nothing like the athletic 18-year-old Xavier remembered. Marcus was thin now, his muscles wasted from years of immobility despite the physical therapy that had helped him walk again. His eyes, though, those were exactly the same. Dark, intelligent, and burning with something that made Xavier's stomach clench. "Marcus?" Xavier's voice cracked on his brother's name. "I don't even know where to start. How about with an apology for leaving me to rot in this place while you built an empire on our parents' graves? When guilt makes you hide from hard truths, are you protecting others or yourself? Have you ever discovered that your good intentions caused more harm than facing difficult realities? Share your experience below. You built a life while I lay here counting ceiling tiles," Marcus said, his voice carrying the rasp of years without use. "You married, had miracle children, became a hero in the medical community. And I got nothing but your guilty checks and the knowledge that everyone who ever loved me thought I was better off dead." "I thought I was protecting you," Xavier replied, his voice breaking. "I thought keeping you hidden was mercy. The doctors said you'd never wake up. They said your brain was too damaged to recover. I was 15 years old, Marcus. I didn't know what else to do." "Mercy?" Marcus laughed, the sound hollow and terrifying. You know what mercy looks like, little brother? It looks like taking everything from you the way you took everything from me. Xavier sank into the chair across from his brother, feeling the weight of 16 years of guilt pressing down on his shoulders. The fake pregnancy claim, Vivian Monroe. What do you actually want, Marcus? The company? Money? Just tell me what it takes to end this. You think this is about money or the company? Marcus leaned forward, his eyes burning with 16 years of cultivated hatred. This is about legacy. Those miracle twins of yours, the genetic research that made them possible. It all came from experiments our father conducted before the accident. What are you talking about? Dad wasn't just running a pharmaceutical company, Xavier. He was conducting experiments on human fertility that would have gotten him arrested if anyone knew. Experiments on his own sons. Marcus pulled a folder from beside his chair, thick with yellow documents. Experiments that should have made me the miracle, not you. Xavier's blood ran cold as he processed his brother's words. Their father had been brilliant, driven, sometimes obsessive about his research. But experimenting on his own children? I have the documentation to prove that Blackstone Pharmaceuticals was built on stolen research and human suffering. Marcus continued, his voice carrying the satisfaction of someone who'd been planning this moment for months. Your perfect family exists because of crimes our father committed. Your miracle twins aren't miracles at all. They're the result of genetic manipulation that started before you were born. You're lying. Am I? Marcus tossed the folder onto the table between them. Read for yourself. It's all there. The experiments, the funding sources, the test subjects who were never told what was being done to them. Dad kept meticulous records. He was proud of his work, even the parts that would have destroyed him if they'd ever come to light. Xavier stared at the folder like it might bite him. Everything he'd built, everything he'd believed about his miracle children, about his impossible fertility, about the genetic compatibility that had somehow activated his dormant reproductive cells. All of it might have been designed by a man who'd been dead for 16 years. What do you want me to do with this information? I want you to suffer. Marcus's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. I want you to know what it feels like to have everything you believed about yourself turn out to be a lie. I want you to watch your perfect family crumble when the world finds out that Blackstone Pharmaceuticals was built on human experimentation. And then what? You destroy me, destroy the company, destroy my children's future. What do you get out of it? Marcus smiled, and for a moment, Xavier saw the brother he remembered. The one who'd taught him to ride a bike, who'd covered for him when he broke their mother's favorite vase, who'd been his best friend before everything went wrong. I get to stop being invisible, Marcus said. I get to finally exist. The pharmaceutical empire that funded their miracle life was built on secrets darker than anything Xavier had imagined. And Marcus had the proof to bring it all crashing down. Xavier returned to Atlanta with a folder of documents and a heart full of dread. He found Aaliyah waiting in his home office, her nursing training already prepared to help him process whatever he'd discovered. How bad? She asked as he dropped into the chair beside her. Worse than I imagined. They spread the documents across his desk, working through the night to understand the full scope of what Xavier's father had done. Research notes dating back 30 years, consent forms that were clearly forged, financial records showing payments to test subjects who had never been told the true nature of the experiments. The storage facility in Boston held boxes that hadn't been opened since the accident that killed Xavier's parents. Over the following week, Aaliyah helped her husband sort through decades of research notes. She watched his face transform from confusion to horror, to the kind of grief that rewrites everything you thought you knew about yourself. If you discovered that the most beautiful thing in your life had been designed by someone else's manipulation, would it change how you felt about it? Can something that started as an experiment become real love? Tell me your thoughts. My father wasn't just researching fertility, Xavier said, his hands trembling as he held a file marked with his own name. He was engineering it. The car accident that left me infertile. The specific genetic markers that somehow activated when I met you. It was all designed. We weren't a miracle, Aaliyah. We were an experiment that finally worked. Aaliyah set down the papers she'd been reading, her expression shifting from shock to something more complicated. Xavier, look at me. He met her eyes, expecting to see the same devastation he felt reflected back at him. Instead, she looked almost calm. Our children are real, she said firmly. Whatever your father did, whatever experiments he conducted, Xavier Jr. and Aaliyah Rose are real people who exist because we chose to love each other. The origin of something doesn't determine its value. But everything we believed was a lie. Was it? Aaliyah picked up the research notes, scanning them with her trained medical eye. Your father may have manipulated genetics, but he didn't make us fall in love. He didn't make you chase me to Boston or propose in front of our children. He's been dead for 16 years, Xavier. He doesn't get credit for the family we built. Xavier wanted to believe her. Wanted to accept that their miracle could remain miraculous, even with darker origins. But the documents kept revealing new horrors. Test subjects who developed cancers that might have been connected to the experiments. Funding that had come from sources that would have been illegal even 30 years ago. There's something else, Aaliyah said, her voice changing as she examined a particular page more closely. This handwriting. It's different from your father's. Xavier looked at the document she was holding. A note dated just days before the accident that had killed his parents and put Marcus in a vegetative state. The experiment worked, but not on the intended subject. Aaliyah read aloud. Xavier shows the markers. Marcus shows nothing. This changes everything. What does that mean? It means someone else was involved in these experiments. Someone who knew the results before your family's accident. Aaliyah's nursing training had taught her to spot patterns that others missed. Xavier, this handwriting belongs to a woman. The letter formation, the pressure on certain words. Your father didn't write this note. Then who did? Aaliyah flipped through more documents, searching for the same handwriting. She found it scattered throughout the research files, always on the most sensitive documents, always adding observations that seemed more personal than scientific. Whoever wrote these notes was your father's research partner, she said finally. Someone who knew everything about the experiments. Someone who understood the results better than he did. My father worked alone. He never had a partner. According to who? The official company records? Aaliyah pulled out her phone, already searching for answers. What if the official story isn't the whole truth? What if someone else has been connected to Blackstone Pharmaceuticals from the very beginning? The question hung in the air between them as the sun rose over Atlanta, casting long shadows across documents that seemed to multiply with every hour they spent searching. Someone had known the truth before anyone died. And that someone was still alive. Every villain has an origin story. But some origin stories reveal that the real enemy isn't who you expected. The investigation took another week, during which Xavier and Aaliyah barely slept. They hired forensic accountants to trace the funding sources Marcus had mentioned. They consulted handwriting experts to identify the mysterious second author in the research notes. They dug through decades of family history looking for anyone who might have worked alongside Xavier's father. The answer, when it came, arrived from an unexpected source. Marcus called on a Tuesday afternoon, his voice carrying something Aaliyah hadn't heard before. "Fear. We need to meet," he said. "Both of you. There's something I should have told you from the beginning." They met at the facility in Massachusetts, the three of them sitting in Marcus's suite like a family reunion that no one had planned. The hostility that had defined their previous encounters was gone, replaced by something that felt almost like alliance. "I've been played," Marcus admitted, the words seeming to cost him physically. "Since the day I woke up, there's been someone guiding me toward revenge, feeding me information, connecting me with Vivian, helping me plan how to destroy you. I thought I was in control, but I was just another piece on her board." "Her?" Xavier leaned forward. "Who are you talking about?" Marcus pulled out a photograph, yellowed with age, but unmistakable. Xavier's father, standing beside a woman who looked remarkably like their mother, but wasn't. The photograph was decades old, yellowed with age, but unmistakable. Xavier's father, standing beside a woman who looked remarkably like his mother, but wasn't. The resemblance was designed, cultivated by a woman who had spent years studying her sister to become the perfect substitute. Victoria Blackstone had never died in any accident. She had simply waited in the shadows for her moment to take everything her sister had stolen from her. When you discover that family betrayal goes back further than you imagined, does it make the current pain easier or harder to bear? Have you ever learned that wounds you thought were new were actually inherited? Share in the comments. Your Aunt Victoria was your father's research partner long before he married our mother, Marcus said, his tone shifting from hatred to something almost sympathetic. She helped develop the fertility research that built Blackstone Pharmaceuticals. When your father chose her sister instead of her, she didn't just disappear. She recreated herself. And she spent 30 years planning how to reclaim what she believes was stolen from her. Aunt Victoria died when I was a baby, Xavier said. There was a funeral. I've seen the photographs. You've seen what she wanted you to see. Victoria Blackstone has been alive this whole time, building resources, making connections, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When I woke up from my vegetative state, she was there within a week, offering sympathy, offering information, offering revenge against the brother she convinced me had abandoned me. Aaliyah studied the photograph more closely. The woman beside Xavier's father had the same bone structure as their mother, the same coloring, the same elegant posture. But something in her eyes was different, colder, more calculating. "Vivian Monroe," Aaliyah said suddenly. "She looks like this woman." "Vivian is Victoria's daughter," Marcus confirmed. "Born from an affair with your father that lasted years. She's been raised her whole life to help her mother reclaim the Blackstone legacy." The pieces began falling into place with devastating clarity. Victoria had lost the man she loved to her own sister. She'd watched from the shadows as that sister raised the children that should have been hers, lived the life that should have been hers, died in an accident that Victoria may have had more involvement in than anyone knew. "The car accident," Xavier said, his voice hollow. "The one that killed our parents and put Marcus in a coma. Was Victoria involved? I don't know for certain, but I know she was in Boston that week. And I know the accident investigation was closed very quickly, with very little scrutiny." Marcus's hands shook as he spoke. "I've spent months being her puppet, believing I was getting revenge for myself when I was really just advancing her agenda. Victoria doesn't want to destroy the company, Marcus continued, something like fear creeping into his voice for the first time. She wants to control it, and she'll go through anyone to get it, including you, including me, including your children. I thought I was using her for revenge. But I'm starting to realize I've been a pawn in her game since the day I woke up. The brother who had seemed like the ultimate enemy was actually just another victim. But if Marcus wasn't the real threat, how much more dangerous was the woman who had been controlling him from the shadows? The enemy of my enemy might be my brother, even when that brother tried to destroy everything I love. The conversation continued for hours, Marcus sharing everything he knew about Victoria's network, while Xavier and Aaliyah processed the magnitude of what they were facing. By the time the sun set over the Massachusetts countryside, something unexpected had begun to form between the brothers. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of understanding. The brothers sat across from each other in the facility's garden. The first genuinely honest conversation they'd had since before the accident that changed everything. Marcus's anger had transformed into exhaustion, and Xavier's guilt had softened into something that looked almost like hope. Somewhere in the wreckage of their family's secrets, they were finding pieces that might still fit together. When someone who hurt you reveals they were also being manipulated, does it change your capacity for forgiveness? Can shared victimhood become the foundation for healing? Tell me what you think. I don't know how to forgive 16 years of isolation, Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of all those years spent trapped in his own mind. But I know I don't want to be the man Victoria turned me into. I looked at photographs of your children and felt nothing but hatred for what you had. That's not who I was before the accident. We can't change what happened, Xavier replied, reaching across the space between them for the first time. His hand hovered in the air, an offer rather than a demand. But we can choose what happens next. Help me protect my family from Victoria, and I'll spend the rest of my life making up for the years I left you alone. Marcus stared at his brother's outstretched hand for a long moment. 16 years of rage, 16 years of isolation, 16 years of being forgotten by everyone who should have loved him. All of it compressed into this single decision. He took Xavier's hand. Tell me what you need, Marcus said. Everything you know about Victoria's plans, her network, her resources, her weaknesses. We need to understand what we're dealing with before we can fight back. For the next several hours, Marcus shared the details of his months working with Victoria, the lawyers she'd hired, the investigators she'd employed, the elaborate scheme to destroy Xavier's marriage through the fake pregnancy claim. But more importantly, he shared what he'd learned about Victoria herself. She's obsessed with your children, Marcus admitted. Not just as leverage against you. She talks about them like they're hers somehow. Like they represent the family she should have had with your father. Our children are not her family, Aaliyah said, her voice carrying the cold fury of a mother protecting her young. They never will be. I know that. But Victoria doesn't see it that way. In her mind, everything that belongs to the Blackstone name belongs to her. She's been waiting 30 years to claim what she believes she's owed. The conversation was interrupted by Marcus's phone buzzing with a message. He read it, and his face went pale. It's Vivian, he said. She wants out. She says Victoria is planning something bigger than either of us realized, and she's scared. That evening, Vivian Monroe appeared at the Blackstone mansion unannounced, her fake pregnancy belly gone, and her designer confidence replaced by genuine terror. Aaliyah found her on the front porch, mascara streaming down her face, looking nothing like the polished woman who tried to destroy her marriage. "Victoria knows I've been having doubts," Vivian said, her voice shaking. "She has photographs of everything. The twins at school, Aaliyah at the hospital, even the grandmother at church. She told me if I don't do exactly what she says, she'll make sure none of them survive to see next week." Aaliyah looked at this woman who had been her enemy, who had faked a pregnancy and filed false legal claims and threatened everything she'd built. But she also saw a daughter who had been raised as a weapon, manipulated by a mother whose obsession had consumed any capacity for genuine love. "Come inside," Aaliyah said finally. "We need to talk." The conspiracy had escalated from family drama to genuine danger, and the woman who had seemed like an enemy was now asking for protection from something far worse. Naomi Johnson had survived poverty, diabetes, and raising a granddaughter alone. A billionaire family's drama was just another Tuesday, and she had wisdom that no amount of money could buy. While Xavier coordinated security measures and legal strategies with Marcus and their team of investigators, Aaliyah found herself drawn to the guest house where her grandmother had made a home on the Blackstone property. The guest house on the Blackstone property was modest by mansion standards, but filled with the same warmth Naomi had cultivated in their tiny Jacksonville apartment. African violet plants lined every windowsill, and the smell of her famous peach cobbler filled the air as Aaliyah described the threat facing their family. "So, let me understand this," Naomi said, pouring sweet tea into glasses that had traveled with her from Florida. "Your husband's crazy aunt, who everyone thought was dead, has been controlling his brother from the shadows, trying to destroy your marriage with a fake pregnancy, and now she's threatening your children because she thinks she deserves the family fortune?" That's the short version, yes. Naomi chuckled, the sound carrying decades of wisdom earned through struggles that made billionaire family drama look like children's games. "Baby, I've seen worse at church bingo night. Who in your life provides the kind of wisdom that puts everything in perspective? The person who reminds you of your own strength when you've forgotten it? Tag them in the comments or share what they've taught you." "Baby," Naomi said, her weathered hands steady around her coffee cup, "I've watched you survive being abandoned while pregnant, raise miracle twins through hurricane and heartbreak, and build a life most people only dream about. Some woman hiding in shadows thinks she can scare you." She chuckled again, shaking her head. "Victoria Blackstone doesn't know who she's dealing with. You come from people who survived slavery, segregation, and poverty that would have broken weaker souls. This is just another obstacle, and we don't run from obstacles. We climb over them. It's different this time, Grandma. She's threatening the children, and that's exactly why she's already lost." Naomi set down her tea and took Aaliyah's hands in her own, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman approaching 80. "You know what I've learned in all my years? The people who threaten children are the ones who've already run out of good options. Victoria's scared, baby. She's been planning this revenge for 30 years, and now it's falling apart because you and Xavier figured out her game. Scared people make mistakes. What if her mistakes hurt my babies? Then we make sure they don't. You've got security now, right? Private investigators, lawyers who know what they're doing. Xavier hired the best. Good. And you've got something else Victoria doesn't have." Naomi squeezed her granddaughter's hands. "You've got family who actually loves each other, not the twisted mess Victoria grew up in, where sisters competed for the same man and children were raised as weapons. Real family. The kind that shows up when things get hard." Aaliyah felt tears threatening, the stress of the past weeks finally finding an outlet. "I'm scared, Grandma." "Of course you are. Only fools aren't scared when their children are threatened. But being scared doesn't mean being helpless. It means being ready." Naomi reached up to wipe a tear from Aaliyah's cheek. "Your mama, God rest her soul. She was scared every day of her short life. Scared of poverty, scared of being alone, scared of not being enough. But she still had you. She still loved you. And when she passed, she left you with me, knowing I'd raise you to be stronger than fear. I miss her. I know, baby. I miss her too. But she's watching over those grandbabies of yours, just like I'm watching over you. Victoria Blackstone doesn't stand a chance against 3 generations of Johnson women." The conversation was interrupted by Naomi's phone buzzing with a text message. She glanced at the screen, and for the first time Aaliyah could remember, her grandmother's face went pale. "They've been watching me too," Naomi whispered. Turning the phone to show a photograph of herself at Ebenezer Baptist Church, Xavier Jr. and Aaliyah rose on either side of her, smiling for what they thought was a tourist's camera. "Victoria wants us to know that no one in this family is safe." Aaliyah stared at the image of her children, so innocent, so unaware of the danger circling their family. Something shifted inside her, fear transforming into something harder, colder, more determined. "She made a mistake," Aaliyah said quietly. "What's that, baby?" "She threatened my grandmother." Aaliyah stood, her spine straightening with resolve that felt like armor settling into place. "Now it's personal. When a snake threatens your children, you don't negotiate. You cut off its head." The photograph of grandmother Naomi with the twins at church changed everything. Victoria had made her intentions clear. No one in the Blackstone family was safe. But she'd also made a critical mistake. She'd given them a target for their rage and a deadline for their response. Within 24 hours, the Blackstone mansion had transformed into a command center. The war room they'd created in Xavier's home office looked like something from a political thriller. Screens showing security camera feeds from multiple locations, legal documents spread across every surface, and a team of professionals who'd learned never to underestimate the determination of parents protecting their children. Xavier had hired the best private security firm in the Southeast, former military specialists who now guarded the twins around the clock. Grandmother Naomi had been moved into the main house, her guest cottage too vulnerable to the surveillance Victoria had demonstrated. Marcus had flown in from Massachusetts with everything he knew about Victoria's network, his guilt transforming into determination to help the family he'd nearly destroyed. And Vivian Monroe, the woman who had faked a pregnancy to ruin Aaliyah's marriage, now sat at their planning table as an informant against her own mother. When someone threatens what you love most, what awakens inside you? Have you ever surprised yourself with strength you didn't know you possessed? Share your story of finding power in protection. "Victoria's been planning this for 30 years, Aaliyah said to the assembled team, her voice carrying the authority she'd developed through years of advocating for sick children at the hospital. But she's been planning to fight Xavier alone. She didn't account for his brother changing sides. She didn't account for Vivian developing a conscience. And she definitely didn't account for me." She pulled up Victoria's photograph on the main screen, the image of a woman who had spent 3 decades nursing hatred into something monstrous. "This woman thinks she can threaten my children? Let me show you what happens when you underestimate a mother who's already survived the impossible." The plan took shape over the following days. Legal teams prepared injunctions and criminal complaints based on Vivian's testimony. Private investigators traced Victoria's financial network, identifying the shell companies and offshore accounts that funded her operations. Media consultants developed a strategy to control the narrative if Victoria tried to go public with the research documents Marcus had given her. Xavier watched his wife coordinate the response with a mixture of awe and gratitude. The woman who had once traveled 1,000 miles on a Greyhound bus to prove her impossible pregnancy was now commanding a small army of professionals. Her quiet strength transformed into something fiercer and more focused. "You're amazing," he told her during a rare quiet moment. "I should have included you from the beginning." "Yes, you should have." But her voice carried no anger anymore, just the matter-of-fact assessment of someone who had moved past grievance into action. "But we're here now. Together. That's what matters." Marcus contributed intelligence about Victoria's patterns, the way she communicated with her network, the locations she considered safe. Vivian provided details about her mother's psychological vulnerabilities, the obsession with the Blackstone legacy that had consumed her entire adult life. "She's not entirely sane," Vivian admitted during one late-night planning session. "She's built her whole identity around being wronged by this family. Taking away her revenge would be taking away her reason for existing." "Good," Aaliyah replied. "Then we take it away." The counterattack was scheduled for the following Monday. Legal filings would be submitted simultaneously in 3 states. A carefully worded press release would frame Victoria as a disturbed individual whose claims about Blackstone Pharmaceuticals were the delusions of a woman with a documented history of mental instability. Security teams would execute coordinated actions to neutralize Victoria's network. Everything was ready. The team was prepared. Victory seemed certain. But that night, as Aaliyah checked on her sleeping twins one final time, she discovered that Victoria had already made her move. Aaliyah Rose's bed was empty. The window was open, curtains drifting in the night breeze, and a note on the pillow contained 3 words that stopped her heart. "Now we negotiate." Every parent's worst nightmare has a name, and that night, hers was Victoria Blackstone. The scream that tore from Aaliyah's throat brought everyone running. Xavier reached the children's room first, his face going white as he processed the empty bed, the open window, the note that represented every fear he'd been trying to prevent. "Call the police," Aaliyah said, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. "Now." The Blackstone mansion that had seemed like a fortress now felt like a crime scene, police officers moving through rooms where just hours earlier their daughter had practiced her reading and asked for one more bedtime story. Xavier sat on the floor of her empty bedroom, holding the unicorn stuffed animal she'd slept with since infancy, while Aaliyah coordinated with investigators with the same focus she brought to medical emergencies. When crisis hits, do you fall apart or find strength you didn't know you had? Have you ever had to be strong for someone else when you wanted to break down yourself? Share what carried you through your darkest moments. "How did she get past the security?" one of the detectives asked. The security was watching for external threats, the team leader admitted, his face gray with guilt. "We had cameras on every entrance, guards patrolling the perimeter. But Victoria didn't come from outside. She was already inside." The investigation revealed that Victoria had been hiding in the mansion for hours, concealed in a section of the basement that the security sweep had missed. She'd waited until the house was quiet, then made her way to the children's room with the practiced patience of a woman who had spent 30 years planning every detail. Xavier Jr. had slept through everything, his sister's absence not noticed until Aaliyah's nightly check. The boy now sat with his grandmother in the kitchen, confused and frightened by the police presence, but unaware that his twin had been taken. "This is my fault," Xavier whispered, his voice broken in ways Aaliyah had never heard. I should have told you about Marcus years ago. I should have dealt with Victoria when I first learned she was alive. Our daughter is gone because I thought I could protect everyone by keeping secrets. Aaliyah knelt beside him, her hands framing his face with fierce tenderness. The woman who had once needed his strength was now the one providing it. Listen to me. We don't have time for guilt. Our daughter needs us to be the parents who survived the impossible together. Victoria expects us to fall apart. We're going to prove her wrong. How can you be so calm? I'm not calm. I'm terrified. Aaliyah's voice cracked for just a moment before she rebuilt her composure. But terror doesn't help Aaliyah Rose. Action does. So we're going to figure out where Victoria took her. And we're going to bring her home. The police investigation moved with frustrating slowness. Protocols and procedures that felt like obstacles rather than help. But while officers interviewed neighbors and reviewed camera footage, Aaliyah was already working another angle. She found Marcus in the study, his face haunted by the knowledge that the woman who had manipulated him was now holding his niece. "You know Victoria better than anyone," she said. "Where would she take her?" "I've been trying to figure that out." Marcus ran his hands through his hair, exhaustion and guilt carving deep lines in his face. "Victoria has properties all over the East Coast, but most of them are known to her network. She'd need somewhere private, somewhere she felt safe. Somewhere with meaning to her." Marcus looked up, something clicking behind his eyes. "The facility, where I spent 16 years. Victoria visited me there dozens of times after I woke up. She called it her sanctuary, the place where she could finally be honest about who she was. Would she take a child there? She might. The staff is loyal to her, not to the facility's official owners. And it's isolated enough that no one would hear anything they shouldn't." At 3 a.m., Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. He read it, and his expression shifted from despair to something almost like hope. "It's from Victoria," he said. "She wants to negotiate. She's sending coordinates." "It's a trap," Xavier said. "Obviously." Marcus stood, his decision already made. "But it's also an opportunity. Victoria thinks I'm still her puppet. She doesn't know I've been helping you. If I go to her, pretend I'm there to support her demands, I can get close enough to find out exactly where she's keeping Aaliyah Rose. I know where Victoria is keeping her," Marcus said, his voice urgent. "But the location is a place only I can access. The facility where I spent 16 years. She's holding your daughter in the room next to where I was trapped for over a decade. Victoria thinks I'm still under her control. She doesn't know I've switched sides. And that's exactly how we're going to get Aaliyah Rose back. The facility that held one brother in the dark for 16 years would not claim another victim. Not if Aaliyah Blackstone had anything to say about it." The plan came together in the hours before dawn. Marcus would approach Victoria openly, pretending to support her demands while secretly gathering intelligence. The security team would position themselves around the facility's perimeter, ready to move the moment they had confirmation of Aaliyah Rose's location. Police would coordinate from a command post down the road, their involvement official enough to make any evidence admissible in court. And Aaliyah would be going in with the rescue team, despite every argument Xavier and the security professionals made against it. The Massachusetts countryside looked peaceful in the pre-dawn light. But the facility that rose from the manicured grounds held anything but peace. Aaliyah adjusted the tactical vest the security team had insisted she wear, her nursing training helping her stay calm even as every maternal instinct screamed for her to storm the building immediately. What would you do to protect your child? What lines would you cross? What fears would you face? Tell me about the fierce love that drives you." "Mrs. Blackstone," the security team leader said, his tone making clear this was his final attempt at dissuasion. "I really think you should wait outside with the police." Aaliyah turned to face him with an expression that had made interns tremble at the hospital. "That woman has my daughter. I've delivered babies during hurricanes, survived abandonment while pregnant with twins, and rebuilt my life from nothing more than determination. Either you let me go in with your team or I go in alone. Those are your options." The team leader looked at Xavier, hoping for support. Xavier just shook his head. "I learned a long time ago not to argue with my wife when she's made up her mind, especially when it comes to our children." Marcus entered the facility first, his return explained by the story they'd constructed. He'd had second thoughts about betraying Victoria, wanted to help her achieve her goals, needed to be on the winning side. Victoria bought it because she wanted to believe it, because her ego couldn't accept that the pawn she'd created might have developed his own will. 20 minutes later, Marcus sent the signal. Aaliyah Rose was in the East Wing, 3rd floor, room 312. The same floor where Marcus had spent 16 years in a vegetative state. The woman's twisted sense of poetry, putting a kidnapped child in the shadow of her previous victim. The security team moved with precision that Aaliyah found both impressive and terrifying. Doors were breached, guards neutralized, corridors cleared with efficiency that spoke to military training and countless operations. She followed in their wake, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. They found Aaliyah Rose in a room decorated to look like a child's bedroom. Expensive toys scattered across the floor, a television playing cartoons, snacks arranged on a small table. The 5-year-old looked up when her mother burst through the door, her face breaking into a smile that shattered every bit of composure Aaliyah had maintained. "Mommy." "The lady said Mommy and Daddy were coming for a visit," Aaliyah Rose explained as Aaliyah swept her into her arms, tears streaming down both their faces. "She said we were going to be a new family. But I told her I already have a family. I have you and Daddy and Xavier and Grandma and Uncle Marcus." "That's right, baby." Aaliyah held her daughter so tightly she was afraid she might hurt her, but she couldn't make herself let go. "You have all of us. And we're never letting anyone take you away again." But as they turned to leave, Victoria's voice came over the facility's speaker system, the sound crackling through every room and corridor. "Did you really think it would be this easy? The building is surrounded by people loyal to me. No one leaves until I get what I came for." Aaliyah pulled her daughter closer, shielding her with her own body as she faced the camera in the corner of the room. "And what I came for, dear Aaliyah, isn't the company. It's you." Victoria Blackstone had spent 30 years planning her revenge on the family that rejected her. She hadn't planned for the woman who refused to be a victim. The security team reported that Victoria's claimed forces were largely a bluff. A handful of guards loyal to her remained in the building, but they were already being neutralized. The people surrounding the building were actually police officers who had moved in when the rescue operation began. Victoria was cornered, and she knew it. But cornered animals were dangerous, and Victoria had one last card to play. She appeared at the end of the corridor herself, looking nothing like the master manipulator they'd been fighting. In the harsh fluorescent lights of the facility's main corridor, she looked like what she truly was. A woman approaching 70 who had wasted 3 decades on hatred, whose elaborate schemes had crumbled against the simple power of a family that refused to let fear destroy them. When you finally understand why someone tried to hurt you, does it change anything? Can empathy exist alongside accountability? Share your thoughts on facing those who wronged you. You want me? Aaliyah said, stepping forward while keeping Aaliyah Rose shielded behind her. Why? What could I possibly represent to you? Victoria's eyes filled with something that looked almost like envy. Her voice, when she spoke, carried exhaustion rather than menace. You're everything I was supposed to be. You came from nothing and earned everything through love and determination. My sister stole the man I loved, and their sons got everything I helped build. But you didn't steal anything. You were just better. And I hated you for it. I don't understand. Of course you don't. Victoria laughed, the sound hollow and sad. You don't understand what it's like to watch someone else live the life you were supposed to have. To spend 30 years waiting for your chance to reclaim what was stolen, only to watch a stranger walk in and receive everything you wanted without even trying. You think I didn't try? Aaliyah's voice carried incredulity rather than anger. I worked 3 jobs while caring for my sick grandmother. I went to nursing school on scholarships and determination. I traveled 1,000 miles on a bus to prove my pregnancy was real when your nephew called me a liar. Nothing about my life has been handed to me. But it worked. Victoria's voice cracked. For you, it worked. You got the man, the children, the family. You got the miracle. And I got nothing but years of planning that fell apart the moment you refused to let fear destroy your marriage. Aaliyah looked at this woman, who had kidnapped her daughter, threatened her family, and tried to destroy everything she'd built. She should have felt nothing but hatred. Instead, she felt something unexpected. Pity. That's not my burden to carry, Aaliyah replied with quiet strength. Your bitterness is your own prison. I won't let you make it ours. Victoria seemed to collapse inward, the fight draining out of her as police officers approached from both ends of the corridor. Marcus stood among them, his face showing the complex emotions of watching the woman who had manipulated him finally face consequences. I loved him, Victoria said as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. I loved him first. Everything I did was because I loved him. No. Aaliyah's voice was gentle but firm. Everything you did was because you couldn't accept that love doesn't guarantee anything. It has to be chosen, and he didn't choose you. As Victoria was led away in handcuffs and the family began the long journey home, Xavier held both twins in his arms while Aaliyah leaned against his shoulder, their small family surrounded by the people who had helped save them. Marcus, Vivian, the security team, even police officers who had become invested in their story. Is it over? Xavier Jr. asked, his 5-year-old wisdom cutting through the adult drama. Is the bad lady going to leave us alone now? Aaliyah looked at her husband, at the brother who had found redemption, at the daughter they'd rescued, at the life they had built from impossible beginnings. Yes, baby, she said, her voice carrying conviction she finally fully felt. It's over. And now we get to focus on what matters. Being a family that chooses each other every single day. 5 years after a one-night stand created miracle twins, 10 years after a man swore he could never have children, the Blackstone family gathered to celebrate not just survival, but the kind of love that transforms everything it touches. 1 year had passed since Victoria's arrest. 12 months of healing, of therapy, of slowly rebuilding the sense of safety that her actions had shattered. 12 months of watching their children recover from trauma with the resilience that only the young possess. 12 months of becoming stronger as a family than they'd ever been apart. Jacksonville Memorial Hospital looked different than it had 7 years earlier when a lonely nursing student met a billionaire donating equipment. The Blackstone family wing now occupied an entire floor, its walls decorated with children's artwork and its rooms filled with families receiving the kind of care that had once seemed impossible without wealth. The twins' 6th birthday party filled the wing's main gathering room with laughter, balloons, and more presents than any 2 children could possibly need. Xavier Jr. had grown tall for his age, his father's dark eyes and his mother's determined chin making him look like a perfect blend of both parents. Aaliyah Rose had developed her grandmother Naomi's quiet wisdom, her serious expressions occasionally breaking into smiles that lit up entire rooms. 7 years ago, Aaliyah said, addressing the gathered crowd at the twins' birthday celebration, I stood in this hospital terrified and alone, working double shifts to pay for my grandmother's medicine and my nursing school tuition. I never imagined I'd return as the head of pediatric nursing, married to the man who seemed so far above my world that we might as well have been different species. She looked at Xavier, at their children, at the community that had grown around their unconventional family. But that's what miracles do. They don't just change circumstances. They change who we believe we can become. The crowd included faces that represented every chapter of their journey. Dr. Patel, who had delivered the twins during Hurricane Helen and now served on the advisory board of the Blackstone Foundation. Dr. Martinez, whose genetic counseling had helped them understand their miracle and whose therapy had helped them become worthy of it. Miss Rosa, who had flown up from Atlanta with Cuban coffee and homemade bread. Her bookstore now featuring a children's literacy program funded by the family she'd helped nurture. Marcus stood near the back of the room, still uncomfortable in crowds, but determined to be present for his niece and nephew's celebration. The brother who had emerged from 16 years of darkness had spent the past year learning how to live in the light. He'd begun working with the Blackstone Foundation on mental health initiatives, his own experience informing programs that helped families affected by long-term medical crises. Vivian Monroe, now Vivian Martinez, after a quiet name change and a quieter path to redemption, worked as the Foundation's community outreach coordinator. She would never fully escape the shadow of what her mother had done. But she was building something new from the wreckage of her upbringing, helping other women break free from manipulative family dynamics. Grandmother Naomi presided over the food table like the queen she was. Her diabetes now managed by specialists who made house calls. Her apartment in the guest house filled with the sounds of great-grandchildren who visited every Sunday after church. She told Aaliyah once that she never imagined living long enough to see her granddaughter this happy. Now she planned to stick around for the great-great-grandchildren. Speech, someone called from the crowd, and Xavier found himself pushed forward by well-meaning friends. He stood beside his wife, their children between them, looking out at a room full of people who represented every miracle that had brought them to this moment. 10 years ago, I was told I would never have children, Xavier said. The accident that killed my parents and nearly killed my brother had taken that possibility from me. Or so I thought. He looked down at the twins, who were already eyeing the birthday cake with the impatience of 6-year-olds everywhere. What I didn't know then was that miracles don't always come in the forms we expect. Sometimes they come as a nursing student in a hospital cafeteria who sees you as a person instead of a bank account. Sometimes they come as 2 tiny heartbeats on an ultrasound screen. Sometimes they come as a family that refuses to fall apart no matter what tries to destroy it. That evening, after the party ended and the children were tucked into bed at the Jacksonville penthouse where everything began, Xavier and Aaliyah stood on the balcony overlooking the city that had witnessed both their first meeting and their second chance. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? Aaliyah asked, leaning into his embrace. Every day. Xavier pressed a kiss to her hair. Every day, I think about the morning I walked away from you. Every day, I'm grateful you were brave enough to fight for what I was too scared to believe. I wasn't brave. I was desperate. Maybe they're the same thing. He turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face with the reverence he'd learned through years of earning her trust. Maybe courage is just desperation with direction. You were desperate to prove the truth. I was desperate to protect myself from hope. The difference is, you let your desperation drive you toward something. I let mine drive me away. Their kiss carried the weight of 7 years and the lightness of knowing they'd chosen each other through every trial. When they moved inside, to the bedroom where they'd first made love and where they'd begun their family, their connection felt different than it had in those early, desperate days. Their lovemaking was neither desperate nor performative, but the steady, knowing touch of partners who had chosen each other through every trial and emerged more committed than before. Xavier worshipped her body with hands that knew every curve, every response, every way to make her feel cherished. Aaliyah gave herself to him with the full trust of a woman who had tested that trust against the worst possible circumstances and found it unbreakable. Afterward, as they lay tangled in sheets that had witnessed both their beginning and their continuation, Aaliyah traced patterns on his chest. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking that the best miracles aren't the ones that defy medical science. They're the ones that defy human nature. The miracle isn't that we had children. It's that we became people worthy of raising them. So let me ask you this. What would you do if someone saw your worth before you believed in it yourself? If they proved that people can change, that families can heal, that love can survive secrets and schemes and the darkest parts of our humanity? Would you run from that kind of love? Or would you fight for it with everything you have? Comment below with your answer. Tell me if you believe in medical miracles, in second chances, in the kind of love that defies everything trying to destroy it. And remember, the most powerful love doesn't rescue you from your life. It recognizes the strength that was there all along and helps you become brave enough to use it. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that miracles don't stop at medical impossibility. They extend to healing, forgiveness, and families built from the beautiful mess of human imperfection. Subscribe for more stories that make you feel, think, and maybe even heal a little. Tell me in the comments, what aspect of Xavier and Aaliyah's journey resonated most with you? This is Mr. Daniel, and this has been the conclusion of our Miracle Twins saga. Remember, the best love stories aren't about finding someone perfect. They're about finding someone committed to becoming worthy of the family you build together, one choice at a time, through every storm and every blessing that comes your way. Until next time, keep believing in the magic of second chances and the miracles that happen when broken people choose to heal together.